Good day. My name is David Carton, and I'm an attorney with Mandelbaum Barrett. October is Domestic Violence Month, and New Jersey has one of the strongest domestic violence laws in the entire country. It offers victims of domestic violence immediate protection, and if those restraints are made permanent, the final restraining order that would be entered is extremely difficult to have lifted, and the consequences for violating a final restraining order are significant and may include jail time. If someone has been a victim of domestic violence, the first step is to contact the local police. If this takes place during normal business hours, the party is to go to the Superior Court of New Jersey in their local county. And if it takes place after business hours, the police will get an emergent judge on the phone. Each county has a domestic violence victims unit. So if this takes place in court, after the necessary complaint is filled out at the domestic violence unit, you'll speak to a hearing officer or a judge to explain what occurred and why you're seeking a final restraining order for your protection. This is called an ex parte application, which means the other side is not contacted at that point and initially does not tell their side of the story. If the incident occurs outside of business hours, as I said, this will occur not in the Superior Court, but will be taking place at the police station or via the telephone. It's crucial that the victim provide to the court as much specifics about what we call the predicate act of domestic violence as possible. In addition, they're to provide as much detail about a history of domestic violence because that's an important component of the filing. The reason for this and the reason for the specificity is that at the final hearing, a court won't consider anything other than what is set forth within what we call the four corners of the domestic violence complaint. If the temporary restraining order is granted, it will become immediately effective, and that person will be protected at their home. They'll be protected at their place of employment, and third parties, such as family members, can also be added as protected parties. So if there's someone that you believe needs to be added as a protected party, it's important that you tell the judge that. Other than these protections, parenting time can also be modified, it can be changed, it can be suspended, and interim support can be ordered. The defendant will then be served by local law enforcement. At that time, they're advised of the terms of the temporary restraining order and told that a violation of the non-contact provisions can be a criminal act, which would be prosecuted by the local county prosecutor's office as a contempt proceeding. Although a violation of a temporary restraining order or a final restraining order is a violation of a civil order and generally what we call a third or fourth degree offense that does not carry a presumption of incarceration, a second violation carries an automatic 30 days in jail. Separate and apart is the opportunity for criminal charges to be filed against the defendant. This may be done by the police officer if they've witnessed it and have probable cause, or it can be done by the person who is applying for the TRO themselves. The next event is in Superior Court. That date is usually found on the final page of the temporary restraining order. That hearing is supposed to happen within 10 days of the temporary restraining order being entered. However, it's not uncommon for that date to be put off even longer than that. And so if the initial date or a trial date is put off, the restraints that are put in place in the temporary restraining order will continue to remain in full force and effect. At the final domestic violence hearing, both parties are entitled to have counsel, the plaintiff to prosecute the matter and the defendant to defend the matter. However, neither side is entitled to a lawyer appointed by the state of New Jersey. You would have to retain your own attorney to do this. The victim will testify in what is called direct examination, be cross-examined by the defendant or the defendant's lawyer. The defendant then has the option of testifying, and the same methodology would apply there. Any evidence that the plaintiff has, such as photographs, text messages, emails, audio or video recordings, or any other proofs, should be brought to court. I always suggest that you contact the court in advance to make sure they have the necessary technology that's needed, and some courts require that information to be submitted the day before. If a photo or a video is on a cell phone, it is also important that you bring that device to court because that is what is referred to as the best evidence. And it's important that if you're showing a photograph and that photograph is on your phone, somebody may ask to see that photograph on your phone to make sure it has not been modified. At the conclusion of the hearing, the court will award the plaintiff a final restraining order if the court finds two things. They have to find by a preponderance of the evidence that A, that the defendant committed an act of domestic violence against the plaintiff, and B, that the plaintiff needs a final restraining order for their protection. Both of these factors will have to be proven to the court, or the court will vacate the temporary restraining order, and you will leave court with an order dismissing it, and there will be no protections. Even if the plaintiff does not receive a final restraining order, the defendant, if they have a firearms ID or firearms and they've been seized at the time of the temporary restraining order, there may be a secondary process that has to be initiated against the state of New Jersey if the defendant is looking to reclaim those weapons. If the final restraining order is entered, the defendant will be forced to be fingerprinted, photographed. They are also placed on a domestic violence registry, and the final restraining order will be sent to all law enforcement. They will be unable to possess a firearms ID in the state of New Jersey or any weapons. They can be ordered to attend anger management and counseling. They can be fined in order to provide financial support or other compensation. Parenting time can be modified in the final restraining order as well. It's also of note that if a plaintiff calls a defendant after a restraining order is entered and invites them to meet and the defendant responds, that defendant is in violation of the restraining order, even if invited by the plaintiff. While a final restraining order can be modified and it can be vacated, this is a very, very challenging process, and in most cases, please assume that a final restraining order is there until the death of one of the parties. Remember, before you make any important decisions that can have a dramatic and permanent effect on your life, please ensure that you're getting accurate information. Your neighbor does not know. Google is not great. AI? No. May I? Please don't hesitate to reach out for me or any of my colleagues here at Mandelbaum Barrett if you have any questions whatsoever. Thank you.